The door was opened. I just went back and reread my speech on the floor because the gentleman, I hadn't done that yet. I went back and reread my speech on the floor. I stand by every word of that speech, and in it I referenced the fact that I had just a few months prior had been in agreement with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle with respect to January 6th, which there's disagreements on our side of the aisle on some of that with respect to the votes at the time, and that I'd taken very strong disagreement and sought apology from our colleague on our side of the aisle about some of the remarks that were said, but felt that this was not the right path to go down.
The House chamber was already on edge when Ilhan Omar rose to speak. Her voice carried conviction as she talked about injustice, oppression, and what she called deep-rooted prejudice in American politics. But behind the calm exterior, many lawmakers saw this as yet another attempt to dodge responsibility for her past controversial remarks. Chip Roy sat quietly, his eyes fixed on her. Each word she spoke seemed to fuel a growing sense of frustration in the room. Everyone could feel it. Something big was about to happen. What began as a routine discussion was turning into one of the most explosive confrontations in congressional history. When Chip Roy stood to respond, the tone of the entire room shifted. His calm yet commanding presence immediately drew silence. Without theatrics, he began to dismantle Omar's claims, accusing her of using emotional manipulation to mask her divisive record. He reminded the House that leadership isn't about victimhood. It's about standing for principle and truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Roy's words cut deep as he cited specific incidents where Omar had insulted allies, undermined unity, and turned debates into personal crusades. His speech wasn't loud, it was surgical, and every sentence hit with undeniable precision.
Thank you for holding this very important hearing. I'm no stranger to discrimination, hate speech, or threats of violence against my family and myself simply because of my identity. As a Black, visibly Muslim woman who came to this country as a refugee, I've dealt with racist, xenophobic, bigoted comments and threats all my life.
Feeling cornered, Ilhan Omar struck back with fiery passion. She accused Chip Roy of being part of the establishment that refuses to understand marginalized voices. Her frustration poured out as she labeled Roy a symbol of privilege and hypocrisy. The chamber erupted with gasps as the insult echoed through the hall. While her words might have energized her base, they shocked many colleagues. Instead of making her case stronger, Omar's personal attack only deepened the divide. It was clear she had crossed a line, the kind that can't be walked back once spoken before the entire nation. The reaction was immediate. Lawmakers began shouting over one another as Chip Roy demanded decorum. The speaker's gavel slammed repeatedly, calling for order, but the tension was uncontrollable. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a public implosion of professionalism on the House floor. Reporters scrambled to capture every word, knowing this was turning into a defining political moment. Roy's supporters accused Omar of disrespecting Congress itself, while her defenders claimed she was being unfairly attacked. But one fact was undeniable. The atmosphere had become electric, and no one could predict what would happen next.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard from my colleagues the reasons why the Representative Omar should be removed from this committee, but I feel like all the reasons have not just yet been stated, which is why I rise to add for the record. We've heard about the comments that were made regarding anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli views, but I rise to add to the record that as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I've sat there and heard the representative actually spew anti-American rhetoric as well. I've been in that committee room where the representative equates Israel and the United States to Hamas and the Taliban. Absolutely unacceptable for a member of that committee. I've also heard the representative equate that it is the United States' fault that there is turmoil in Venezuela.
When calm finally returned, Chip Roy delivered the speech that would define his career. With unwavering focus, he laid out a timeline of Ilhan Omar's most controversial moments. From her past remarks about 9/11 to her heated comments about foreign policy, he said it wasn't about race or background. It was about respect, truth, and accountability. His voice grew firmer as he declared, "If we can't hold ourselves to a higher standard, how can we expect the American people to trust us?" Every sentence was a dagger of truth. And by the end, even Omar's allies looked shaken. The chamber sat silent, realizing history was unfolding before their eyes. In the minutes that followed, a noticeable shift took place. Lawmakers who had once defended Ilhan Omar began quietly distancing themselves. The energy in the room was no longer about defending a colleague. It was about saving the integrity of Congress. Chip Roy's takedown had set a new tone. Behind closed doors, conversations began about whether Omar's repeated outbursts had finally gone too far. For years, she had weathered criticism and bounced back stronger. But this time felt different. The sense of isolation around her grew thicker by the minute as even her own party members refused to come to her defense.
Could associate myself and do with all the remarks of the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. That some people did something is the one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags for me. I think there are significant amount of justifications to raise issues with respect to service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but I would not go down this road. But I'm also reminded, in August of 1993, Juan Gonzalez was a batter for the Texas Rangers and was plunked by Alex Fernandez from the White Sox. And just a little bit later, Robin Ventura came to the plate for the White Sox, and Nolan Ryan was on the mound. And Robin knew what was about to happen. Nolan plunked him. And then Robin Ventura charged the mound, and then Nolan Ryan beat the crud out of him on the mound. That's what happened. We all know that's what happened. It's old school baseball. Nolan Ryan defined old school baseball. This is raw politics. That's what this is. When the doors opened, then there's a question, and you have to decide what you're going to do. We're not going to unilaterally disarm. Just not going to do it. I'm tired of that. It just is what it is. Guys took a shot at someone on our team, about statements I disagreed with and took very much to task. But I've got strong disagreements with Representative Omar. I would prefer, if it were just starting from scratch, I would not choose this path. I'd just say whatever stuff you all want to say. We'll say whatever stuff we want to say. Our managers will pick our team. Let's go battle it out in committee. That's what I would say. I would say that's the right place to be. But at this point in time, it is my considered judgment that, like Nolan Ryan, we've got to respond. And I'm just going to be blunt and honest about it. That's just my belief. I think it's important.
The following day, Congress reconvened under intense national attention. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Would there be consequences? Chip Roy led the charge, arguing that Omar's remarks had violated the standards of congressional conduct. His message was straightforward. If members of Congress can insult their colleagues on live television without repercussions, then the institution loses its moral authority. Lawmakers debated fiercely, some insisting that removing her would set a dangerous precedent, while others argued that letting her stay would erode public trust. The room was divided, but the momentum toward discipline was undeniable. When Ilhan Omar took the stand one last time, her voice carried a mixture of defiance and desperation. She claimed she was being unfairly targeted because of who she was, not what she said. Her tone softened as she spoke about her journey, her struggles, and her desire to represent unheard voices. But her words didn't land the same way anymore. The room remained silent, not in respect, but in exhaustion. Lawmakers had heard enough. Omar's final defense sounded less like conviction and more like damage control, a sign that she knew her political standing had crumbled beyond repair.
That is not because of the oppressive socialist and communism that has spread throughout Central and South America and Venezuela at the hands of the Maduro and Hugo Chavez regimes. That is unacceptable. And as a New York representative to hear the representative belittle, to try to diminish the worst terrorist attack on United States soil on September 11, 2001, as some people did something, that is unacceptable as well. And I hold the same standard for this side of the aisle that I do the other, because when another colleague on my side said something about 9/11, I also voted to have her removed from the Education Committee because I thought that was inappropriate. So I'm being consistent here, and I hope my colleagues will do the same to show that this is about consistency and accountability, because we should not have an individual with those views on the committee that is tasked with representing our country and our Congress to foreign nations. I yield back.
When the speaker finally called for a vote, the entire nation watched. Cameras rolled as names were read aloud. One by one, voices echoed across the chamber. The result was overwhelming. Ilhan Omar was officially removed from her committee seat, marking a stunning fall from power. Applause erupted from Roy's side of the aisle while others sat in disbelief. The decision wasn't just about politics. It was about the message it sent. The idea that no member, no matter how influential, is above accountability had been reinforced in dramatic fashion. The era of unchecked rhetoric had come to an end. In the days following her removal, Ilhan Omar faced a wave of public scrutiny. News outlets replayed the confrontation, analyzing every frame. Some praised Chip Roy for standing firm in the face of political pressure, calling his speech a defining act of leadership. Others accused Congress of silencing a minority voice. But across the country, Americans debated what the moment truly meant. Was it justice or political theater? Regardless of interpretation, one truth remained. This fiery exchange between Roy and Omar would be remembered as a turning point in modern congressional history where words finally carried consequences.
Important. And I hope we'll get through this. We'll kind of hip check each other. Maybe we can sit down and figure out by the end of this Congress, next Congress, whoever's in charge, we figure out how we're going to play ball going forward and set those rules. And I would say the same thing about open rules, closed rules, structured rules. And the ranking member could scoff. We've had X number of votes. We'll have continued debate about this stuff over time. There will be closed rules. There will be structured rules. There will be open rules. I'd like to have that debate. I'd like to have the considered judgment of the ranking member on that, and as I have debate on my side of the aisle. I'm just saying that we can figure out how to protect this institution and try to decide how to do things the right way. But in this instance, I'm going to be very open and honest about why I'm going to vote for this resolution. That's why. Again, recognizing the statements that the representative has made, I find to be highly problematic, extremely concerning, raising very serious questions from a foreign affairs perspective, as the ranking member has raised about statements made and how he feels about people being on certain committees over here.
Gentlemen,
I think we should, in my opinion, we should withdraw from that battle going forward and then let each manager pick their team. And I'll be glad to yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
And I would simply say I appreciate Mr. Roy's honesty. I mean, and again, kind of similar to what Mr. Massey said previously, and not to belabor the point, because I think you've already conceded this, but why not emulate the same resolution that was used in the past as opposed to...
Within hours of the vote, newsrooms across the country exploded with headlines. Major networks replayed the heated exchange between Chip Roy and Ilhan Omar on loop, analyzing every word and gesture. Political commentators debated whether this was justice or overreach, while social media turned the confrontation into a nationwide conversation. #Up supporting both sides began trending as Americans weighed in on what accountability should look like. For Omar, the spotlight that once made her a national figure now became an unrelenting storm she could no longer control. The reaction from the public was brutal. Many voters felt Ilhan Omar had long crossed the line, accusing her of using her platform to divide instead of unite. Chip Roy quickly became a symbol of discipline and principle, praised for defending the dignity of Congress. Even among Democrats, quiet murmurs began about whether Omar's behavior had done lasting damage to their image. What once was a question of political ideology had now turned into a question of character, and Omar's reputation was taking hit after hit in the court of public opinion. As the story grew, even the White House couldn't ignore it. Reporters questioned whether Omar's removal signaled a deeper political rift within Congress. The administration issued a cautious statement emphasizing the importance of respectful discourse and accountability for all members.
Calling this something that it is not in terms of the due process language. That's the part that I just didn't understand, because if it doesn't provide due process, why?
So,
as you said, it's partisan, it's not, and again, I appreciate the honesty on that front, and obviously the past presidents that you cited and the rest, but
I don't want to interrupt.
No.
Yeah, I would just say, agreeing with the gentleman from Kentucky, putting something in the whereas clauses, outlining I think, genuine statement by the speaker on our side or whatever, saying that would be taken into consideration and viewed is something. It is something. It is not, I will be very clear, due process in the way we mean it in court. This is not a court. This is not due process in that sense. The question here is what we're going to do as members to afford each other the opportunity to speak, be heard. I'm much more in the favor of let each other speak and be heard, and go use your First Amendment rights to go say why you think that person said something crazy or disagreeable. I would prefer to be in that space. I have no problem with that language being in the whereas clauses. I'm not going to go trumpet it as some grand amount of due process. It's something. It's something in there, and I'd hang my hat on it and say, yeah, go argue the ethics and make the claim. But that's not what this is about. I mean, let's just be clear.
But behind the scenes, officials reportedly felt uneasy. The confrontation had shifted national focus away from policy and toward political infighting. Chip Roy's message of accountability had resonated so deeply that it forced the country's highest offices to acknowledge the tension inside Washington. Days later, Ilhan Omar sat down for an emotional TV interview, trying to reclaim her image. Her tone was softer, more reflective. She spoke about being misunderstood, about the pain of being constantly targeted, and about standing up for people who feel voiceless. But even as she tried to rebuild sympathy, her answers were met with skepticism.
Ryan Plunk's Ventura for a reason. And I yield back.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know what gets me fired up? When people pretend that what's happening in Washington is just politics as usual. What we witnessed in that video wasn't just another speech. It was a raw, unfiltered moment of truth from someone who's been in the trenches long enough to know how deep the rot goes. Let me break it down for you, because what he said matters, and what it means matters even more. We had a representative from Texas standing tall, owning the truth that this wasn't just about Ilhan Omar's past comments or her seat on a committee. This was about a door being kicked wide open years ago, and now folks like us finally walking through it with eyes wide open and fists clenched with resolve. He laid it out, plain as day. The Democrats set the precedent. They changed the rules. They launched filibusters against Hispanic and Black conservative judges. Judges who were more qualified than half the folks sitting on benches today. Remember Miguel Estrada, Priscilla Owen, Janice Rogers Brown? Blocked, sidelined, ignored, not for what they did, but for who they were and what they believed. But now, when we push back, suddenly it's a crisis? Give me a break. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. You can't preach about fairness while you're swinging the bat, and then cry foul when we finally step up to the plate.
Many viewers felt she was dodging responsibility again. The damage had already been done, and no interview could erase the image of her fiery insult that echoed through the halls of Congress. Meanwhile, Chip Roy's popularity skyrocketed overnight. Conservative voters saw him as the man who restored order and courage to Congress. His social media following surged, his speeches went viral, and political analysts started labeling him the voice of accountability. But for Roy, it wasn't about fame, it was about principle. In several interviews, he said, "You can't lead with fear of backlash. You lead by doing what's right." Those words struck a chord with Americans tired of political games, cementing his image as a non-nonsense truth-teller. However, Omar's removal also created deep cracks within her own party. Some lawmakers warned that this move could set a dangerous precedent, that future majorities might use similar tactics for political revenge. Others quietly agreed that Omar's behavior had simply gone too far. Closed-door meetings grew tense as members argued about loyalty versus responsibility. The divide wasn't just ideological anymore. It was moral. For many Democrats, the question wasn't about defending Omar. It was about deciding where their line of tolerance truly stood. Dramatic example of America's political unrest. Some foreign leaders called it proof of democracy's strength that even powerful figures could face consequences. Others claimed it revealed growing instability in Washington. Meanwhile, supporters of Chip Roy argued that this moment showed the world that America still valued accountability above politics. It became clear that what started as a personal feud had evolved into a global conversation about leadership and integrity. In the weeks that followed, members of Congress took a hard look at how things had escalated. Many admitted that civility had eroded in recent years, turning debates into spectacles instead of solutions. Chip Roy spoke again, saying, "This shouldn't be about one person. It's about how we conduct ourselves as representatives." His remarks drew rare bipartisan applause. Even some of Omar's former allies quietly agreed that the confrontation had forced the House to confront an uncomfortable truth. Respect in politics had become a forgotten value. As the dust settled, Ilhan Omar faced an uncertain future. With her influence in Congress severely weakened, questions arose about whether she could ever recover politically. Her opponents began preparing to challenge her in upcoming elections, while former supporters hesitated to publicly defend her. The once bold Congresswoman who commanded attention in every debate now found herself fighting to stay relevant. It was a humbling fall from grace, a reminder that political power, no matter how strong, can disappear in an instant. Months later, the confrontation between Chip Roy and Ilhan Omar was still being talked about. Documentaries, podcasts, and political shows revisited the clash that shook the House floor. Some framed it as a story of justice, others as a cautionary tale of pride and downfall. But one truth stood above all. It changed the tone of Congress forever. The message was loud and clear. Words have weight and actions have consequences. Chip Roy's stand against Ilhan Omar wasn't just a moment. It became a defining chapter in America's ongoing battle between integrity and ideology.